I hope the screen is visible, the PPT.
Yes, sir.
This is the last part of chapter 4. So maybe we will be able to complete it in next 1 hour. Okay, so let's start. So last class, I guess I had told you about this online analytical processing and multi-dimensional data mining part, and we discussed more about the applications of data warehouse like information processing, analytical processing, and data mining. Now we'll start move forward for this part, that is data warehouse implementation. So as you all know, this data warehouse usually contains huge volumes of data, and your OLAP servers would want the decision support queries to be answered within seconds. Like it shouldn't take more time. Okay. Therefore, it is very much crucial for data warehouse systems to support highly efficient techniques for your cube computation. It also should support your access methods and query processing techniques. Okay. So we'll just have a quick overview of your efficient data cube computation methods. Okay. So at the core of your multidimensional analysis, there is something called efficient computation for aggregations. Like you should be able to query and compute something which involves multiple dimensions. So in SQL terms, if you want to put this aggregations are usually referred to as group bys. Okay. It's basically you're performing a group by over the data. So each group by operation can be represented by a cuboid, where something like a set of group bys form a lattice. If you remember last time we had shown the lattice also, like 0D, 1D, 2D, 3D and 4D. So these were the four major things in a lattice. So it's like each aggregation operation in your data computation is referred to as, or can be mapped to group by operation in SQL, and each group by can be represented by a cuboid, and a set of group bys or set of cuboids will form something called lattice. So the first thing we'll be seeing is the compute cube operator and something called the curse of dimensionality. Okay. So it's like the compute cube operator computes aggregates over all subset of dimensions which is specified in a particular operation. Okay. But since it is performing, or it's doing the aggregation over all subsets of dimensions, it can require excessive storage space, especially if the number of dimensions is too large. Okay. So there is one example. Say suppose you want to create a data cube for some organization, and it contains 3 dimensions like your city, item and year, and one measure, that is your sales in dollars. So in that uh, such a database, you will be able to analyze queries such as the following, that is compute the sum of sales by grouping them by city and item, compute the sales with respect to city, compute the sales with respect to item. But if someone asks what is the total number of cuboids or group bys that can be computed for such a data cube, so given the fact that there are 3 attributes, that is city, item and year, which you can characterize it as dimensions, and there is one measure, that is sales in dollars, the total number of cuboids or maybe the group by operations that can be computed for such a cube would be 2 to the power of 3. Okay. Usually it is 2 to the power of 3, that is 8, given that there are 3 attributes and a single measure. Okay. So the possible group bys, the possible group by operations which you can perform are, I have put in the slides, that is with respect to city, item, year, that is one group by city, item, city, year, item, year. Then with respect to city, item and year, and empty brackets. Here the empty brackets signify that there is no, this part signifies that there is not grouped, or the group by is empty. So this group bys form a lattice of cuboids, which is shown in this particular figure. The base cuboid, that is this part, contains all the three dimensions, namely city, item, and year. So this particular thing can return total sales for any combinations of these three dimensions. The apex cuboid, or this particular thing 0D, refers to a particular case where the group by is empty. So maybe it can contain the total number of all sales. Instead of sales with respect to particular city, item, or year, or any combination of this, it will contain total sum of all sales without any constraint. So the, as we saw in the last class, the base cuboid is least generalized, that is more specific, and the apex cuboid is most generalized or least specific. And this particular thing is denoted as, what is the usual thing we write here? We had seen this in the last class. For apex cuboid, we will write something in general. Usually, what is that word which we'll write here for apex cuboid? Anyone? Do you remember? What is, I mean, you can write something here in part of apex cuboid. You can mention something here. What is that word or keyword which you can mention here? Anyone? Or if someone is typing, I don't know. Anyone? Do anyone remember? Or should I don't know, call out names here who are present? Anuvrat, Anuvrat, are you there? No response means is not there. Yeah, I need some response. If no response, I'll be removing from the meeting. At least when people go out of meeting, they will realize. I have removed Anuvrat. Let him join again if he wants. Anyone? Rajat Nayak? Rajat? Again, I don't think even he is there. Ishan? Ishan Tyagi? Don't think even he is there. Hari? See, if you are here, you have to respond. Otherwise, I am removing you from the meeting. There is no point in attending like this. At least, am I audible? And then why no one is responding? Ishan, I removed. He joined back, but he's not responding.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm calling out your name from last 3 minutes. I've removed you from meeting because you didn't respond. You joined back, but still no response. I think I should do that. Otherwise, there is no point like this. I will randomly call out names. If no response, I will remove you from the meeting. I think I should follow that exam wala pattern here. Waiting in the lobby. If no response for more than 5 minutes, which means that you have logged in and you are roaming, there is no point in attending classes like that. Again, the question is open to everyone now. Do you remember what comes in this part in that apex cuboid? This part here. It can be replaced with what word? Yeah, it is all. So you can replace this particular thing with the keyword called all, which means that it is most generalized. So it's like if you start the apex cuboid and you start exploring downwards in a particular lattice, it is equivalent to performing some operation like we studied in the OLAP operations called the drilling down operation. So if we do the opposite way, like if you start with the base cuboid and explore upwards, it is similar to performing here rolling up operation. So a SQL query with a no group by, such as this. Mic is on. So I will just again repeat SQL query which contains no group by. Like if the SQL query is something like uh, compute the sum of total sales. Okay. So if you have a SQL queries like this, which contains no group by at all, so that is your zero dimensional operation. And if your SQL query containing one group by operation, such as maybe compute group by, I mean, compute the sum of sales group by city or group by item or group by a particular year. So such operations is called, I mean, referred to as one-dimensional operation. So similarly, if there are two group by operations with respect to two dimensions, it is 2D and similar things. So one thing with respect to your analytical online analytical processing or OLAP things is it might need access to different cuboids for different queries. You cannot depend on one single cuboid. If the query is quite complex, so your processing tool might require access to different cuboids. So it might I mean, given this scenario, so it might be a good idea to compute or rather pre-compute few things in advance. Okay. So, but this PU computation, you can say that in few cases leads to faster response time, and it can also avoid some redundant computations. So if you PU compute, pre-compute few things and to keep it ready-made, obviously since it is ready-made, it will be fast response time, and one some redundant computation in case similar queries you get it in the future time. Okay. So in most of your OLAP products, if not every OLAP, most of them usually resort to some degree of pre-computation. So if a multi-dimensional scenario is involved, so most maybe 90+% of your OLAP products, which is existing now, would have been pre-computed some degree of computations beforehand. But your major challenge with respect to this pre-computation thing is it requires storage capacity. Obviously, you have to, once you calculate something, you have to store it somewhere. But if all the cuboids in the data cube, every cuboid in data cube, if it is pre-computed, this storage space might explode. Like you might require extreme uh, amount of storage space, especially when the cube has many dimensions. Okay. So the storage requirements are even more excessive when these dimensions have this concept hierarchies. Concept hierarchies, if you remember, we had studied in the last class, like from lowest hierarchy, you can reach to the highest hierarchy. So this particular problem is referred to as curse of dimensionality. The curse of dimensionality, if someone has to explain the curse of dimensionality, it's like you have to mention these things. Like your OLAP may require access to different cuboids for different queries. Therefore, it might be a good idea to compute in advance some cuboids in a data cube. Okay. So this pre-computation often leads to your faster response. That is one advantage. But the major challenge with respect to this pre-computation is if you want to pre-compute every cuboid in data cube, then the storage space which might be necessary will be too huge, especially it becomes more aggressive if the dimension is too much. And along with the dimensions, if dimensions has this concept hierarchies in them, like it is not just year, it is like days, weeks, months, years. This concept hierarchy is involved. Then the storage requirement will be much more severe. So this problem is referred to as curse of dimensionality. So it's like if there is an n-dimensional data cube, okay, so you may wonder how many cuboids might be there. So if assuming that there is no hierarchies associated with any of the dimensions in that particular data cube, then the total number of cuboids for an n-dimensional data cube is usually 2 to the power of n. Okay. This we have seen that 2 to the power of 3, 8. That we have seen in one of the examples in this particular example. Okay. There were 3 items or 3 dimensions, that is city, item and year. So you got 8 cuboids. Okay. Same thing. If there is no concept hierarchy associated, then the total number of cuboids would be, for an n-dimensional data cube, would be 2 to the power of n. However, this is not the case in most of the scenarios. So many dimensions do have hierarchies. For example, time, I just told it. It is not just a single conceptual thing like year. So it's like multi-conceptual levels. It involves multi-conceptual levels like as day, month, quarter, and year finally. So for any n-dimensional data, the total number of cuboids can be generalized by this particular equation, which is on the screen, where Li, this particular thing, Li is the total number of levels associated with the dimension I. Levels here is the concept hierarchies. Okay. So 1 is added to this equation to include the all, that is this part. Li is the number of levels associated with the dimension I for a particular dimension. So you are adding +1 to the equation to include the top level, that is the all part. Okay. So by now, I think most of you have assumed or realized that it is very unrealistic to pre-compute and materialize all the cuboids. So it's better, like especially if there are many cuboids and these cuboids are large in size. Every cuboid is large in size. So it's more reasonable option or feasible option is partial materialization. Instead of materializing or computing every cuboid, so it is better to perform something called as partial materialization. Okay. So partial materialization means to materialize some of the possible cuboids and not everything. So for this partial materialization, there are, for in general materialization, there are 3 choices which anyone can opt from. One is there is no materialization, which means that do not pre-compute any of the non-base cubes. That is one option. Second is full materialization. Here, in this case, pre-compute all of the cuboids. Okay. So the resulting lattice would be referred to as a full cuboid. Okay. So this particular choice, that is the second choice, typically requires huge amount of memory. Okay. Since you are pre-computing all cuboids, it typically requires huge amount of memory in order to store all the pre-computing all the pre-computed cuboids. Okay. The third option, which is more suitable, is your partial materialization, which means that you are selectively computing a subset of possible cuboids. So one thing with respect to this partial cuboid or partial metallization is there is a trade-off between the storage space and response time. Okay. Why? Because you are just selecting few of the or you're performing computation for a selected few cuboids, not every cuboid which is present. So there is a trade-off between the storage space and the response time. If the query contains some computation which is not in this pre-computed thing, then you might have to perform that particular operation. So for that particular query, there is some delay in the response time. But if the query contains the thing which is already pre-computed, so there might be a fast response. So in general, in partial metallization, it represents an interesting case of trade-off between your storage space and the response time. Okay. So the next thing which we'll be studying is the indexing part. Like to facilitate your efficient data accessing, you might require some data structure. Okay, so most of the what is that data warehouse systems support indexing structure, either one of these, either bitmap index or maybe your join index. Okay. So the bitmap indexing method is quite popular because it allows the quick searching, or maybe it returns the result more quickly. So this is an alternative representation to the RID list. Okay. So in general, in bitmap index, if you given a particular attribute, there will be usually a distinct bit vector referred to or indicated as B suffix V for each attribute in the domain. Okay. So there will be a bit vector for each attribute or each value in the attributes domain. So it's like given attributes domain, if it contains n values, so n bits are needed for each entry in the bitmap index. Okay. So it's as good as saying that there are n bit vectors if there are n values. This particular example shows one particular case of indexing OLAP data using bitmap indices. So basically, this is uh, a data warehouse of particular organization, and suppose the dimension, this particular thing it's with respect to a dimension item. Okay. So contains 4 values, that is home, entertainment, computer, phone, and security. So here each value, say for example computer, is represented by a bit vector in this bit map table. So how do you actually form this bit map table? For example, there are the in the base table there will be record IDs like R1 to R8, and this is something like this. There are 2 things, item and city, which were inserted 2 dimensions. So in record 1, the item that is mentioned as home, entertainment, and the city is Vancouver. So you have to create a bitmap index table and there is one for each dimension basically. So one for item and one for city. So since in item there are four distinct values, there will be four distinct columns, and city there are two distinct values v and t. So there are two distinct columns here. So since in R1, this is R1, in the base table there is only H. Okay. So under H you will write 1. Baki sab it will be 0. In R2 there is only C with respect to item. So in this item bitmap index table under R2 only C will be 1. Remaining 3 will be 0. So like this you create or generate this item bitmap index table. So same thing with respect to the city. In R1 only V is 1. In R2 it's just V. So again just V is 1. In R5 there is only T. So V will be 0 here and T will be 1. Okay. So this is how you just given a base table. If you are asked to generate or create bitmap index table for that particular base table, so first you have to write how many records are there. Just write the record IDs. Then the number of columns will be equal to number of distinct values under that particular heading. Okay. So you have to just see what is which item name or which unique thing is there. So H is unique here. So under R1, H will be 1. There is no C, P and S in R1. So those three are 0. This is with respect to item. Same thing you repeat for city. The number of columns will be equal to number of unique values under that particular domain. So here under R1 just V is there is no T. So V will be 1, T will be 0. So this is how you generate your bitmap indexing. So it is said that, or it has been proved that bitmap indexing is more advantageous, or it is more efficient when compared to hash and tree. Hashing and tree indices, when you compare with these two, your bitmap indexing is more advantageous. And this particular indexing is especially useful for domains with low cardinality, because comparing, joining, and aggregation operations uh, in this particular domains are usually less. And it has also been proved that your bitmap indexing usually leads to significant reductions in your space and input-output operations. That is because a single string of characters can be represented by a single bit. So it's like in bitmap, you are representing a string of characters using a single bit, which in turn leads to significant reductions in space as well as your input-output operations. So if your domains are low cardinality in nature, then bitmap indexing is advised. For higher cardinality domains, the method like your bitmap indexing method can be adapted by using certain compression techniques. Maybe if you use as it is, it might not be too efficient. So if the domains are low cardinality, you can use that as it is. If the domains which you are dealing with is high cardinality domains, then you have to use certain compression techniques before you use this particular bitmap thing. Okay. So the second indexing method which we'll be studying is join indexing. So join, this particular thing is similar to your join operation which you'll be performing in your normal database, relational database. Okay. So in your traditional indexing, given It's like what this join operation does is it maps a given value in a given column to a list of rows having that value. I mean, that is the general traditional thing. But in joining indexing, it's like you can join rows of two relations from a given database. So one example they have given, if there are two relations, say RID, this R and S, if there are two relations R and S, and it is performing a joining operation on attributes A and B, where your R, then the joining index, that is your record, join indexing record will be containing, or this particular pair will be entered in the record. Okay, where your RID is your RID and SID are record identifiers for this two relations respectively. Okay. So since this record pair of records are entered in this join index record, this join index record can identify your joinable tuples without actually performing the your joining operations, which are considered to be costly operations, or maybe which might require certain computational power. So this particular joining operations especially useful if you want to maintain the relationship between a foreign key and its matching primary key in a join relation. Okay. So this particular example shows a joining index relationship between a sales fact table that contains two things, location and item dimensional table. So this particular thing they have taken, I mean, the example is taken from the star schema, which we had studied in the last class. The same example, same values they have taken here to explain the join index part. So here the main street value in the location dimensional table, okay, joins with tuples T75, T238, and 3884 of the sales fact table. Okay. Similarly, your Sony TV value in the item dimensional table joins with tuples T75 and T49 of the sales fact table. So your corresponding join index table is given in this particular figure. That is, this is 4.16. So this round figure is 4.17. So you can see that this particular thing shows the linkages in form of in that star schema. So this particular figure, that is, this particular thing shows your join index table for this particular figure. As I told you, the main state is joining for these three tuples, and there is a linkage basically, and Sony TV for these two values, and this contains everything like location and items to sales. Okay. This is the joining table which shows linkage between all the three, location, item, and this sales. So this is just one small example of how to perform joining indexing and how to perform your bitmap indexing. So the next is how to perform your efficient processing of OLAP queries. Okay. So basically, there are two query processing you should be following. One is which operations should be performed on the available cuboids. There's one thing. So this involves the operations such as transforming, like selection, projection, roll up, drill down, etc. So basically you have to select which operation should be performed. The second thing is determine to which materialized cuboids the relevant operations which you have selected here should be applied. So maybe this particular thing involves identifying all the cuboids which may contain answer to a particular query. So out of, you have to determine the cuboid such that the cost is less. Like cost here is your computation cost. So there is one example given. There are 4 cuboids here as shown in the figure, and we are concentrating or maybe concerned with 3 attributes or dimensions like time, item, and location. So only these 3 attributes are there, and there are hierarchies used. Like for time, it is day, month, quarter, and year. And for maybe item, it might be item name, brand, and type. And for location, it might be street, city, state, and country. So these are the dimensional hierarchies which is existing. So suppose there is a query suppose you have a query which you have to process on brand and state, these two things. And if there is some selection constant like year is equal to 2010. Okay. And these 4 materialized cuboids or maybe already computed cuboids are available to you. So which of these 4 cuboids should be selected? Okay, as I told you, you have to select something which makes sense to the query. Okay. So one thing you have to note here is finer granularity data that cannot be generated from your coarser granularity data. Finer granularity cannot be generated from coarser granularity. These things you have to remember. So based on this particular statement, cuboid 2 cannot be used because country is more general than state. As I told you, query in hand is concentrating on brand and state. And your finer granularity, that is your something at a lower level, cannot be generated by something at a higher level. So country is higher level when compared to city. So cuboid 2 is not at all, should not be your choice at all. So Q2 is discarded. So you have a choice between 1, 3, and 4. So you can select 1, 3, or 4, but there should be some cost. Like cuboid 1 may be more costly than cuboid 2. Then cuboid 2 might be more costlier than cuboid 4. Cuboid 4 might be least costlier when compared to 1 and 2. 2 is anyways disbanded. So between 1, 3, and 4, if 4 is least cost, so you will be forced to choose, or if you choose 4, it will be a better option. So rather, how would the cost of each of the cuboid compare if used to process the particular query? Okay. So the user or you yourself are likely to use cuboid 1 because both this item name and city are at a lower level when compared to brand and state. Again, I will repeat, the query in hand is with respect to brand and city, brand and state, sorry, brand and state. Okay. So this query 1, both item name and city are at lower level when compared to, or at lower hierarchy when compared to brand and province, which is specified in the query. Okay. So query 1 would cost the most. Okay. So if there are not many year values, like in the state there are not many year values, okay, but there are many item names available for each brand, then maybe Q3 will be a smaller cuboid when compared to Q4. So in this particular case, when there is not many year values associated, but there are several item names associated with for each brand, then Q3 would be a better choice than Q4. But if there are efficient indexing methods available for that particular data cube or that particular application, then Q4 will be a better choice. So in general, there should be some cost-based estimation to decide which set of cuboids should be selected for query processing. So that is the main thing. Yeah. The next thing, there are a few architectures like ROLAP, that is relational OLAP, MOLAP, which means multi-dimensional OLAP, and HOLAP, that is hybrid OLAP. These are like 2-3 points in each case, like what is the representation they involve, or how data structures are stored. It's a straightforward things. So this one thing I will leave for you to study. So we'll just move for the next thing. This is the last thing. So here, I guess the one thing you have to concentrate is this part. So what is the like one question which you might ask is the data cube technology sufficient to accomplish all kinds of tasks for a larger data sets? So in that case, you have to consider these two cases. One is complex data types and aggregation. It's like your data warehouse will contain complex data types and you have to perform aggregation. So these three things is like should be considered. And the second thing is user control. So it's like your data warehouse is a user control process. Okay. The selection of dimensions, the application of OLAP operations, etc., all are controlled by user. I tend to choose which dimensions I want, or maybe I will select which operations I require. So it is user control. So how user control is better than automation, or is automation better than user control? So these things should be considered or maybe debated upon when you are trying to do something with respect to your data warehouse. These two things. Okay. So we'll study something called as attribute-oriented induction. Okay. So the general idea of your attribute-oriented induction is to first collect the task relevant data using some query, and to perform generalization on that particular data. Instead of performing generalization on the entire data set, you first select the task relevant data and then perform the generalization. So this generalization is usually performed either using attribute removal or attribute generalization. Okay. So we'll just see what each of the thing is. So with respect to this, there is something called data focusing. So as I told you, you have to first select the data which is relevant rather than removing the, rather than performing the generalization over the entire thing. So generalization with respect to attribute removal. So attribute removal is based on the following rule. The following rule, that is, the rule is, if there is a large set of distinct values for a particular attribute. Okay. I'll again repeat. This attribute removal is based on the following rules. Like if there is a large set of distinct values for a particular attribute in the initial working relation, but there are two cases. Either the case one is there is no generalization of operator on the attribute. There are two cases here. There is no generalization of operator on the attribute. That is, there is no concept hierarchy for that particular attribute. That is case one. Or case two is the higher level concepts are expressed in terms of lower level. If any of these case, that particular attribute should be removed from the working relation. The second is attribute generalization. Again, attribute generalization is, again, it follows certain rules. Like if there is a large set of distinct values for a particular attributes and there exists a generalization operator and attribute. Generalization operator is the concept hierarchy exists for that particular attribute. Then you have to select a generalization operator and apply it on that particular attribute. So these two are with respect to this thing. So depending on the attributes, or the application involved, a particular user may prefer some of the attributes to remain. So as a user, you might want to particular attribute to remain at a low level abstraction rather than higher level. Okay. So this control of how high an attribute should be generalized is usually subjective, and the control of this process is called your attribute generalization control. So if the attribute is generalized too high, or if there is extreme generalization takes place, it may lead to something called as overgeneralization, and the resulting results might not be too informative. On the other hand, if the attribute is not too generalized to a sufficient higher level which is demanded by the application, the condition is called under generalization. Okay. Even in this case, the result obtained by performing some operation might not be too informative. So there might be in general, there must be a balance between, or rather, a balance should be attained in attribute orientation or attribute oriented generalization. So there are different possible ways to perform this balance, or maybe in general to control a generalization process. So we'll see two attributes. One is the attribute generalization threshold control, and second is generalized relation threshold control. So the first technique, that is attribute generalization threshold control, it usually sets one generalization threshold for all the attributes in the data set, or sets one threshold for each attributes. You can choose any one of this. So if the number of distinct values in an attribute is greater than this particular threshold which you have specified, then the attribute removal or attribute generalization should be performed. Okay. So this attribute threshold in most of your data mining systems usually ranges from 2 to 8. And there should be option of allowing the users or experts to modify this threshold values. Okay. For example, if the user feels the generalization reaches too high level for a particular attribute, the threshold can be increased. Okay. So this particular thing, increasing the threshold corresponds to drilling down over that particular attribute. Okay. Again, if the user feels that there is a need to reduce the attribute threshold, so which corresponds to rolling up operation on that particular attribute. The second choice is, or the second technique is generalized relation threshold control. Okay. So this also sets a threshold on the generalized relation. If the number of distinct tuples is greater than the threshold, then the generalization should be performed. Okay. If it is within or below the threshold, then there is no generalization that has to be performed. Okay. So the threshold for the second technique is usually between 10 to 30, that is the values, 10 to 30, that is the usual values. But again, it should be adjustable. There should be option for the user or the expert to change the values. It is between 10 to 30 usually, but if the user feels that it should be less than 10 or greater than 30, that option should be provided. For example, if a user feels that the generalized relation is too small, he can increase the threshold, which means that he is performing the drill down operation in general. Or if he wants, I mean, if he feels that needs to be, there is a need to reduce the threshold, that option should also be provided, which in general means performing rolling up operation. Okay. And these two techniques, that is attribute generalization threshold control and generalized relation threshold control, can be applied in sequence. First, apply this attribute threshold control technique to generalize each attribute, and then perform this relation threshold control to further reduce the size of generalized relation. So no matter which of these generalization technique is applied, the user should be able to, or should be given an option to address the or adjust your thresholds. So this is one thing. The last part is this particular algorithm, which shows how attribute induction is actually implemented. This algorithm is the basic algorithm for attribute oriented induction. So the input would be your database, one database, the query, the list of attributes, and you have to give a generalization operator, that is the concept hierarchies for each of the attributes, and you have to give the threshold for each of the attributes. So these three are these 5 to 6 things are the inputs, and output is your generalized relation. Okay. So this step 1 of the algorithm is essentially a relation query to collect task relevant data into W. So it's like you're just selecting or collecting the task relevant data into the working relation. Working relation is denoted by W. Okay. So the efficacy of this or efficiency of this method depends on the query processing methods used. So given a successful implementation, and if you have used a very good database system, this step will usually give a good performance. This step 2, that is step 2, usually collects statistics on the working relation. So this requires scanning the relation at most once. So you have to scan the relation, that is this working relation. The cost for computing the minimum desired level and determining this pairing map V dash for each of the attribute is dependent on the number of distinct values. So we can tell that smaller, usually this particular distinct values for a particular query or a particular attribute is usually smaller than this working relation. That is the number of tuples. I think this, then again this step, all you have, I mean, you did not remember this algorithm as a, I mean, you won't be asked to write a basic algorithm for attribute induction. You can just remember these steps in general, like what is the input, what is the output. The first step is like to get a query, a relationship query to collect the task relevant data. And if you use this a standard database and good query, or if the query is constructed good, this step will expect it to have a good performance in general. And step 2 is basically containing the statistics on the working relation. Like you have to scan the entire relation once or database once and see what is the number of distinct values for each of the attributes. Okay. So the third step is getting the prime relation. Okay. So this is performed by usually scanning each tuple in the working relation and by inserting your generalized tuples into the P. Okay. So usually the overall time complexity is usually 0 to the power of n for performing this particular steps. Okay. If you there are two variations. This generalization, this step 3 generalization can be performed using two variations. If your variation A is used, that this variation if you used, so it's like it might take big O of log P time for this tuple insertion. So total time complexity would be, first of all, you have to search the tuple, that is in this working relation, and you have to insert. So total time complexity would be big O of W into log P. If variation B is adopted, then each attribute would take order of 1 to find the tuple. So the total number for n entries would be big O of n. Okay. So only these things you have to remember with respect to your algorithm. Okay. Major thing is one example they have given. Just tell this figure how to infer this particular figure. So if you can see in this particular figure, the first attribute is name. So there can be large number of distinct values for this particular attribute. And there is no hierarchy which you can mention. Okay. So as per the rule for this attribute removal, you are removing this particular attribute itself. So name is removed. Second is gender. There are only two distinct values here, which is possible, male and female. So there is no generalization as such is required, and you can retain this particular attribute. The third attribute is major. Okay. And assuming that there is a concept hierarchy which has been defined on this, okay, it can be allowed that the attribute major to be more generalized, like your arts and science, engineering or business. Instead of writing CS, it can be more generalized. So by attribute generalization and attribute generalization control, these two parts, you can generalize this major by climbing up the concept hierarchy. So that thing is possible. Instead of CS, you climb one step up and write engineering. Instead of physics, maybe you can climb one step up and write science, basic sciences, something like this. So as far as this attribute is concerned, you can perform your generalization part. The next part is birthplace. So this is one thing. So again, this attribute can have large number of distinct values. So it's better to generalize it. Since birthplace is location and the name given here or the values given here is to city, you can climb up and make it state and climb one more step up and make it country. Okay. So the birthplace can be generalized to birth country. So again, this birth date, it can be generalized to age. Instead of birth date, age, it can be generalized to age, and age can again be generalized to age range, like what intervals the age lies. Okay. And this one example is here. As I told you, name is removed because too many unique values is possible. Next is gender is retained and there is no generalization required. Major, instead of specific low level things, it can be generalized to higher level things. That is done here. Instead of birthplace, if it is city, you can get multiple or two large number of values. So instead of birthplace, generalize it as a birth country. So that is done here. Next is birth date. Again, it can contain too many values. Go one step higher, make it age. Go one step more higher in the hierarchy and make it age range. Okay, so that will reduce the number of values here. The third thing is residence. So again, instead of residence city, as you can see, this is with respect to the street, lowest level hierarchy in the location. So instead of city, generalizing it to, instead of street, generalizing it to city might be a better idea because it contains few distinct values. So that is they have done here. Instead of residence with respect to street, make it residence city. The next attribute is phone. Again, phone number is too many distinct values. You have to remove it. So that thing is removed here, if you can see. Next finally is GPA. So again, there is there can be a concept hierarchy existing for GPA. Like you can convert this grade point average to numeric intervals such as instead of 3.6, 3.5 plus 3.5 to 4 or 3.5 to 3.75. So like this, you can create uh, ranges. Again, this in turn can be generalized as excellent. If the grade point average is between 3.75 to 4, you can tell it, or you can replace it with a value called excellent. If it is between 3.5 to 3.75, you can replace it with a value called very good, something like this. So the attribute can be generalized. Okay. So again, as you can see, this particular thing is this would be a generalized relation after applying the attribute, this particular algorithm on this particular table. Okay. The, how to perform or how to apply this attribute oriented induction given a particular scenario, I hope it's clear. The only thing you have to remember is if there are too many distinct values and there is no concept hierarchy which can be performed, remove that particular attribute. Higher higher level hierarchy is better than lower level hierarchies. So this major instead of CS, you can replace it by science, which is higher level hierarchy. Same, instead of birth city, birth country will have a lesser amount of unique values. So birthplace instead of city, convert it or replace it by birth country. Birth date, again it will be having too many values, but there exists a concept hierarchy. You can go one level higher for age, one level higher for age range, and replace this particular thing by age range. Again, residence instead of street, make it city. Again, phone number, there might be too large number of unique values, but again, you cannot think of any higher level to phone number. So you have to remove that particular part or remove that particular attribute. Again, GPA, this instead of individual things, you can convert it into a range, and for each range, you can tell what is if it is between 3.75 to 4, maybe you can replace it by excellent. If it is between 3.5 to 3.75, maybe replace it by very good, something like this. So instead of this, you can come instead of GPA, again the number of distinct values would be little less. So this particular table shows the generalized part. So this count is like how many these things are there, values are there. It's just like one small thing that you can neglect. Anyways, major thing is how to perform this attribute oriented induction given a particular scenario or given initial working relation, get your generalized relation by applying attribute oriented induction. This is the major thing. I hope it's clear. So with this, we come to an end. Any doubts in today's thing? Anyone? Any doubt? No doubt. If there is no doubt, maybe you can wind up today's session. So only I think only this chapter was extreme theoretical. So, remaining chapters won't be theoretical much. I mean, from next time it's just more of problems basically. So if no doubts, I guess we can wind up.